Welcome to the Anchorage Real Estate Market Update. My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm an associate real estate broker in the state of Alaska, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching you in real estate. And today we're going to be talking about what's going on in Anchorage. There's always been a lot of projections as to what's going on in the real estate market, and I can't really say what's going to happen in the future, but I can tell you what's happening right now in the South Central Alaska market, looking specifically at Anchorage. Now, in this update, we're going to be looking at the single family, the condo, and the multifamily. So it gives you a good snapshot for how the entire market is doing. Before I jump in though, make sure you get this video liked, subscribe, do all that good stuff. And without further ado, let's get into it. All right, now the first thing that we want to look at in Anchorage is going to be the single family homes. And the first thing we want to look at for the single family homes is the number of properties that are actually available on the market. So this time last year, there were about 325 homes that were on the market, and now there's 361. So we do see an increase for the number of properties that are available on the market. Let's take a look though and see how many we would normally expect right around like 2019 before COVID and everything else happened and all that silliness. What we see is that normally we'd see about 850 to about 900 properties available on the market. So we're seeing a bit of an increase compared to the year before. Historically though, we're still pretty low. The next thing we see is the number of properties that actually sold in Anchorage for the single family properties went from 214 this time last year to about 240 this year. So we're seeing a slight increase for the number of properties that have actually sold. Now let's also look and see how many we would normally sell around this time of year. And honestly, that's right about on par. We'd see about 238 up to about 272 in 2017. So about 246, that's more or less what we would expect to see historically, just based on what we would see this time of year. All right, last but not least, when it comes to the single family homes, we see the average sold price went from about $480,000 this time last year to about $514,000 this year, which means we've actually seen a 7% increase for the average sold price year to date. Now, obviously, there are some issues once we start looking at averages because you can have extremes on both ends of the spectrum. It can either be a really expensive property for like $3 million, or it could be like a little shack for like $50,000. You can see that kind of throws all the data off. But this is a consistent metric we've been using just to give an indication for the direction of where the prices are going in Anchorage, and really not seeing those prices sloughing off anytime soon. If anything, the rate at which they're increasing actually has gone up, because the previous year we were sitting at about 5%, and now we're looking at right about 7%. So yeah, we'll talk about why that probably is in the summary, but let's just put a pin in that for now. All right, condos. Let's talk condos. This time last year, we see that there was about 88 condos available on the market. This time of year, now there's about 140. Now that sounds like a huge jump, and proportionally it is, but let's take a look and see what we would normally see around this time of year, looking at the year of 2019. So looking at 2019, normally we would expect to see somewhere in the realm of about 400 up to about 460 condos available on the market, because the condo market in Anchorage really has been stagnant for a long time, and it's kind of rare to suddenly see condos the availability just drop through the floor, proportionally speaking, from a historical point of view. So this is something we're going to keep our eyes on. We do see some condos starting to come back onto the market, so we're no longer at about 20% of the market that we usually have. Is starting to go up a little bit, but we got a long ways to go before it gets back anywhere near to the 2019 levels, and I'm not even sure that we want to, because that was pretty abysmal if you were a condo owner for the longest time in Anchorage. Next, we see the number of condos that actually sold went from approximately 97 condos this time last year to 84 this year. So seeing a bit of a dip, but historically that's actually pretty on par, because looking at 2019, we saw about 98, 95, 81, 98. So we're seeing there's really in the same ballpark. It's not exactly the same, but it's kind of in the same ballpark. So I'm not going to really sweat that too much. Last but not least, we see the average sold price for condos went from about 270 this time last year to about 279 this year to date. Now, one thing I do want to point out, that's not too big of an increase. That's about 3% increase. We have seen a pretty significant uptick in the average sold price for condos in Anchorage. Just to give you an idea, there actually were about 3 years at least that I can see here, the prices for condos actually decreased just because there were so many that were available. But once we started looking at about 2020, that drastically changes because the average sold price in 2020, when we started really feeling the impacts from COVID and everything, went from about $217,000 to the next year $230,000 to 2020 it went to $243,000, 2023 an increase to $270,000, and now we're sitting at about $279,000. So you're seeing about a $70,000 swing for the average sold price for condos over just a couple of years. And that's pretty drastic, but that's what you would expect once you've seen the inventory get so compressed down, because we're seeing that about the same number of condos are being sold as before, but there's just not as many available. So you're going to see those average sold prices going up. And we'll talk kind of about why that is in the summary though. All right, let's go and take a break real quick here. For those of you who've been watching for a little bit, you do know that I host a meetup for people who are not considering, who are actually already living here in the state. And if that's something that, you're here and you just like to meet other people who've recently moved up here, do feel free to reach out in the link in the description section down below. It's a private Facebook group, so you'll have to go request to join that. I'll go ahead and get you approved. And then we just meet once a month and we do like game night, pumpkin carving, hiking, we've gone sledding, family photos. There's just a lot of stuff that we can do just to kind of give you an opportunity to get out and meet people. So yeah, make sure you take advantage of that, and let's go and finish up today's market update. All right, now the next thing we want to look at is multifamily. Now, multifamily in Anchorage always has kind of been an interesting animal because it's kind of a compressed space. There's not a whole lot of land to develop there. And so you're going to see a higher proliferation of multifamily properties in Anchorage than you're probably going to see in most other parts of the state. But let's take a look here. We see that this time last year, there were 87 multifamily properties available on the market. Now there's 103. So that's a nice little increase. Nothing really to write home about. Historically, around this time of year, we would expect to see somewhere closer to about 200, 225. So we're still about half of where we would normally be, but we'll take the wins where we can get them. Next, we see that the number of multifamily properties that actually sold, closed, transferred ownership to the next person went from 22 this time last year to 32 this year. And just looking historically, we're seeing, that's actually about on par. We'd see about 30, 26, 32. So we're actually seeing that, about 32 properties actually selling for the month of October, where we have the most complete data. Actually is pretty on par for what we would see, despite the fact that the inventory is about half of what it normally is. All right, before we get too excited about this next one, keep in mind, obviously, these are averages, and what I mentioned before about there being extremes on both ends of the spectrum of both being really expensive or really cheap can really throw all the numbers off. So let's keep that in mind. But we are seeing the average sold price for multifamily properties went from about $501,000 year to date to about $599,000, which means we've, according to the data here, seen about a 20% increase for the value of multifamily properties in Anchorage. Now, before we get too excited, let's also keep in mind these are averages. I suspect that we just had one really big property that sold here. There was some multi-million-dollar deal, and that's really kind of throwing all the numbers off here. That would just be my expectation. Usually we're seeing we kind of hang out around that $500,000 range for the past couple of years, really since 2021. There really hasn't been that big of movement one way or the other. In the year of 2021, it went up by about 15%. And, just to be around like that 500,000, it wouldn't surprise me if we were somewhere closer to about 500, maybe 510, 515 as the average if we removed that large property that's probably throwing all the data off. I could be wrong, but I really don't think we're seeing about $100,000 increase for the average sold price value for all the multifamily properties that are in the area. I haven't seen that much increase for demand. Now, let's go ahead and give you a summary real quick. What this really means for me if I'm a buyer looking at a market like this. That means, first off, it's kind of grinding more back into being a balanced market, but I'm really not expecting it to turn into like this crazy buyer market anytime soon where everything is on discount. The only time where something like that happens is where there is a glut of inventory, and that's not what we're seeing. We're still seeing inventory really at about a fraction of what it normally is, and that's really not going to change anytime soon because so many people bought a couple of years ago when interest rates were like 2, 3, 4%, or they refinanced during that time and they're like, man, I'm not going anywhere now. So what I recommend for people though, let's get you into something though. Make sure obviously financially it makes sense and all that. The interest rates do come down, then that just gives you an opportunity to refinance at the lower rate without having to compete with a lot of other people, because people like to forget, hey, when the interest rates were super low, it was all just fine and you could just easily get a house, right? That is absolutely not what happened. It was an absolute bloodbath just trying to get into a house. I had buyers, we had made offers. I think my record was like 11 offers for like one, for a young couple, managed to finally get them into a house, but it was brutal. We had to go in $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 over asking price, and we had to waive a bunch of stuff and there's so many more things involved than just, low interest rate. Okay, well, that means it's easy now. No, that means you're going to have more competition. The ideal scenario is you buy now, and then if the interest rates come down, then you can refinance and you're not going to have to deal with all that mess. That's really kind of the best case scenario that I see. Meanwhile, you get to ride that appreciation up instead of having to walk into it and essentially just write a big check to the seller for the amount of appreciation that their property has appreciated. Okay, so that's if I'm a buyer. If I'm a seller, this is not the same market that we had a couple of years ago. It's more balanced now. You're going to have to actually compete with other sellers. Just throwing up iPhone pictures on the MLS and hoping something sticks is not going to cut it now. And you're going to have to make sure that we're positioning ourselves in the market and pricing it correctly, because at this point, if buyers aren't liking your price, they'll just sit. Okay, and your house will sit like a bug on a log if it's not priced correctly. So let's make sure that we're doing our work ahead of time and getting that done. Now, really for the other asset classes, the big thing for condos, it continues to be a pretty small market, which, like I said, that's a pretty big change. If you have been a condo owner in Anchorage for a while, you do know that it's there's been a glut of inventory for the longest time. I've known a number of people where they're kind of regretting buying a condo because they kind of just get stuck and they can't sell the thing. And luckily, that's not the place that we're at anymore. But I've seen a lot of people that were talking about selling before if they could only possibly get out of here, and now here's their big break, and they're like, well, I don't know, maybe I'll just wait and see what's going to happen. It's like, you've been handed a gift. What are you doing? So yeah, that's really speaking to the sellers, to the buyers. Condos are going to be good if you're just looking for a cheap living situation, inexpensive, less expensive living situation than just owning a single family home. Now, it's not going to appreciate at the same rate that a single family property is, and there's always that risk that you're going to see a lot of, that you're going to suddenly see a lot of inventory pop up in Anchorage, because we've seen it for years at this point. They're kind of stepping back right now, so we're not seeing as much inventory as we normally do. But the norm in Anchorage, at least historically, has been there's a lot of condos on the market, and that does tend to push the price down because there are more options for the buyers. As far as multifamily goes, to my investors, make sure the numbers actually balance out. Let me know if you have any questions as far as that goes, and we'll see if we can get you a good, solid investment. This has been my market update for Anchorage. I hope it's been useful. Give this video 2 thumbs up. Comment down below if you have any questions. Reach out to me if you have any questions. This should go without saying, but if you're looking to buy or sell, I want to be your real estate agent, so give me a call if that's something that you need. We'll talk to you next time.